Okay, this is Bateman Broadcasting. I'm Derek Bateman, and with me today is Peter May. Welcome.
Hi.
Peter May, author, but also as I look at your itinerary, Peter, you seem to spend as much time travelling to promote books as you do writing them. That can't be right, is it?
Yeah, it is. Well, in fact, I probably spend more time on the promotion trail than I do actually writing, and that's the way it's gone these days. You know, you're expected to go out there and tread the boards.
That's obviously a good thing from your point of view, but is that actually in itself a sign of success with the books?
Well, it is, yeah, because there's certain demands for you from readers who want you to go to bookstores and do events. And, you know, when I first started doing the books and did promotional events, you know, you would turn up at a bookstore and there would be, you know, 10 people, if you were lucky, and they would sit and play with their phones or do their knitting or stuff while you were talking. And now I go and it's 200 and 300 people. I did Bloody Scotland last year in September with 600 sellout crowd, and that's quite scary, you know, because you have to be a performer now as well. It's not just about writing, you know.
What are they coming for, do you think? I mean, it's interesting. Are they interested in you as the author, or is it just, you know, because they enjoyed the stories and they need to identify in some way? What are they after?
I'm not sure, to be honest.
It's scary, isn't it?
I don't know. I think you start to develop a reputation as a performer. And, you know, way back when I was a real timid boy, you know, I would never speak in public. Used to get a terrible red face and stammer and needed notes and things. And so it was hard work to overcome all that and become somebody who could go up on a stage in front of 500-600 people and tell stories, be entertaining, make people laugh. And you know, I think that's part of it, but people get very, very involved in the characters.
Do you think they kind of want to take ownership in a way?
They do.
If they like something.
Oh yes, very much so. You find that, I mean, I have a Facebook author page and a Twitter account, and you know, there's constant traffic.
So they can communicate directly with you. That's a new thing. Well, a relatively new thing. I mean, in
the old days it would be letters, you know, but now, I mean, I probably get, I don't know, thousands of emails during the course of a year. That's just contact through the website. And then Facebook page, there's this huge interaction that goes on a daily basis. You know, I mean, probably I'm having correspondence with 20, 30 people a day or more. And you know, you look at the reach that you get from a Facebook post, you know, and it can be 20,000 people, you know, if you get shares and all the rest of it. It's quite extraordinary. I don't think authors have ever had the chance to have that kind of connection with readers before, or vice versa.
Have you worked out the secret of what it is you're doing? I mean, do you just do it on instinct? There is a sort of a bit of a trend in your books, isn't there? Because you tend to sort of use different sort of timelines. You can mix two stories from different eras together. I read Entry Island, where you do that. You know,
that's right.
Dealing with the clearances and then modern Quebec and
I suppose that's
Canada.
a kind of recent development. I started doing that in The Black House, which was the first of the Lewis trilogy. It was the first time I'd done that kind of two time frames thing. But the thing is, you know, I mean, you say, what's the secret? What am I doing? I have no idea. When I wrote The Black House in 2005, you know, got rejected by every publisher in Britain. And it was my French publisher that took it up. 3 years after I'd written it. It was in a drawer for 3 years. I'd given up on it. And my French publisher read it, bought world rights, sold it all over Europe. Eventually they sold it to the Brits. And the trilogy here now sold nearly 2 million copies, you know. So those, you know, when I got turned down that time, I'm thinking, what have I done wrong? It's not about what am I doing right. I'm thinking, you know, I thought it was a good book, but obviously all these publishers didn't. But then they were wrong because a lot of readers
So you need belief then?
You know?
You need to back yourself?
You need self-belief. I think if you're going to write, you need to believe in yourself, always, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I remember a publisher in Edinburgh many years ago, and asked him, what would you have done with a book about talking rabbits? As in Watership Down, she just he said, I would have rejected it as soon as they told me what was in it. I would have said, no, I'm not having anything to do with that. That's
yes, but if you read it, it was a great yarn, I remember.
It was, yeah. But I like the idea that, you know, that people can make these kind of mistakes. It's like the guy who turned down the Beatles as well. You know,
Well,
you kind of
right.
wonder
Yes,
what's going on
Decca
there.
Records. Well, I think I think what happened was that the Black House kind of came just before the invasion of the Scandinavians, you know, and they arrived, you know, in force with kind of dark psychological novels set in cold, dark places, which, to every British publisher's surprise, was a huge success. And effectively, that's what the Black House was, you know, a dark psychological novel set in the Isle of Lewis, a cold, dark northern place. And so they created the market for the book in a way, because British publishers are so conservative that they don't lead, they follow. If something's successful, they want more like that. When I was trying to sell books in the late 90s, my agent said to me, he'd just had lunch with all the crime editors, and he said, they're all looking for the next Ian Rankin. And that was it. That's the extent of their imagination, you know. It took a force from outside to change the marketplace.
Is Scotland important when you write? Is it? I mean, there's this sort of old cliche about, you know, you write what you know about because you're on safer ground there. Is that part of it for you as well?
Well, it's funny because, you know, when I quit television in the mid-90s to kind of devote myself to trying to make a success writing books, and the first thing I did was write a series of books set in China. So I couldn't get much further away from Scotland. But that was all about using my journalistic experience to research, to knock on doors and say, you know, can you tell me how this works? And it wasn't actually until I'd finished that series and I'd left Scotland, I was living in France, that I was kind of looking back on my home country. And I don't think I would have written about it if I hadn't moved away. It's that sense of perspective and objectivity you get by not being there that allows you to write about it with, I think, more clarity.
And also it seems from what you're saying that just because you have a manuscript which hasn't been published, don't burn it.
No.
I mean, don't get rid of it.
No. And these days, you know, technology has overtaken publishers. You can publish yourself very easily. There's no stigma attached to it now like there used to be, you know, vanity publishing. Now, people are self-publishing electronically and, you know, in hard copy. And achieving phenomenal success, and then publishers are coming along and saying, "Oh, we'll buy the rights to that." You know, it's already sold 500,000. But so there's a whole new avenue for writers now, rather than going the traditional route via publishers to self-publish.
But you started off in journalism, broadly at the same time as me. You were just saying it must be 45 years, I think, or so since. What was it we were involved in? It was the Young Journalist of the Year award that you won.
The Fraser Award, and you were commended.
Well, there was me and Chick Young and David Livingston, who does Golf and Sky.
Yeah.
And we're all still punting away here, making a living out of it.
They obviously made the right choice, didn't they?
Something like that. But you went through the journalism stage. I mean, was it? And then into script writing for television. I mean, was that a natural progression in some way, do you think? Because a lot of the public will say, well, journalists do make things up, don't they?
Well, certainly during the last year, quite a few did, I think. I mean, journalism, I went into journalism because I actually wanted to write books. But there was no career path to become an author.
So you've always had that ambition?
Yes, always.
Okay.
So, you know, I wanted to make a living as a writer, and journalism seemed like the natural choice because there was, like I say, no career path to become a scriptwriter or a novelist. But journalism was I was a journalist for 8 years, really through most of the 70s, which was a great time. I mean, things were happening there in an extraordinary way. The society was changing, politics was changing, huge industrial disruption. You must remember all that stuff. And it was a great time, I think, to be a journalist. And I got an insight into all sorts of things that, you know, most people, you know, outside of journalism never get to see. From you know, the worst housing estates to, you know, chatting to a prime minister and everything in between. So it was a fantastic grounding.
It does give you a sort of entree in newspapers and journalism, doesn't it? I mean, because the public don't get in behind the scenes, basically. You get to witness stuff. But you were following a referendum from France.
Yes, I was.
You mentioned the media briefly. How? I mean, it's much easier than it used to be. And if you'd been living in France before the electronic media, you'd have got a rolled up copy of the Glasgow Herald coming 2 days after publication.
Yes.
But now, you're as informed as anybody else is instantly. How did it strike you from France, the campaign?
Well, I mean, the thing that shocked me most was the standard of journalism being practiced by the conventional media. As a former journalist myself, I felt that reporters who should be out doing a neutral job and simply reporting the facts were extraordinarily biased. It's one thing for a newspaper to have a point of view, fair enough, but journalists should be out there absolutely unbiased and objective in their reporting, and I felt that they weren't. And that seemed like universally the case with all the Scottish media, which was incredibly loaded against independence. So I found myself trawling the net and finding the independent news sources, which had, that whole campaign provided a fantastic seed ground for these things to grow, like Newsnet. And I'm going to these sources and getting the balance that I'm not getting from the conventional.
I think we almost didn't realise, just how biased the media was, because they're biased in different ways with different issues, but it was the kind of universality of the view on independence, which was quite shocking.
It was. And
this, as you say, it's not just an editorial line taken by the paper to say, well, we don't actually favour independence, but you expect a balance in the rest of the newspaper.
Exactly.
And they didn't really do that job for us.
I was really, truly, genuinely shocked by that. I felt that people I knew, people I'd worked with, I was quite appalled by some of the stuff that they were writing. I couldn't believe it, to be honest.
What did you make of the independence issue? I mean, what's your stance? You were a yes, or you would have been a yes had you had a vote.
I had no vote, but yeah, had I had a vote, I would have voted yes.
What for though? What is it that would drive that vote?
Primarily, I felt it was a question of democracy. And the fact that people in Scotland almost invariably during my lifetime have voted in one direction, and about 2/3 of that time have had a government appointed from the opposite direction. And so that really, to a large extent, the Scots were being disenfranchised within the United Kingdom context. And I just felt that a government in Edinburgh, given the kind of proportional representation, the voting method that's been used for the Scottish government, would provide true democracy, that an independent parliament in Edinburgh would genuinely reflect the views of the Scottish people. One
of the main reasons why a lot of people voted no seems to have been, in essence, fear.
Fear.
Yeah. Well, do you feel any of that? I mean, obviously, if there's an element of unknown, there has to be, to something entirely new. But as we were talking about self-belief earlier on, that you have to have belief in yourself. Yeah. But a lot of Scots didn't seem to have that.
I know. I think you have to go back to the media again. Well, I mean, the No campaign was peddling fear. That was the whole approach. Everything was negative. Everything was about instilling fear. And I believe they've all come out and admitted that had been the strategy. And it worked because the media conveyed that sense of fear almost universally. And so people got frightened, and particularly older people. Who are worried about pensions, the economy. Personally, I think if you're afraid of life, you will. I mean, if I hadn't taken risks, at every crossroads that I came to, I would still have been working out the interest in bank books at the Department of National Savings in Cowglen, which was the first job I got after being expelled from school. That's where I ran away from, literally ran away to London. And there are choices. Everybody comes to choices, and there are always risks associated with them. But if you take the safe option, it's almost like you're pedaling backwards. You have to, you take a calculated risk, obviously, but that's how you go forward. That's how you achieve success. And you have to do it with self-confidence. You have to believe in yourself.
And living somewhere else in another, obviously independent country, I mean, does that make a difference? Has that given a certain perspective to your view of Scotland and Scottish politics?
It does. I mean, I was interviewed quite a lot by the French media about my view, and also because just before the vote I was touring in the States, and I got hold on to a radio show which I thought I was going to be talking about the book, but he spent an hour grilling me about the referendum.
That's great, though, isn't it? Well, yeah. not from your point of view, I suppose. You want to promote the book.
Well, he did every commercial break. He did mention the title of the book, but and then went on to talk about the politics of it all. And he was actually, funnily enough, he was a political. It was a political show. I mean, in my ignorance, I didn't realise that's what it was. But he said, well, if I was Scottish, I would vote for independence. Who in their right mind wouldn't? And certainly that was the view that I was getting from people in France, people in America. They couldn't understand why, given the chance to do it yourself, you would turn it down. And I think it's a great shame.
Can I just ask you about the Charlie Hebdo thing, because you're based in France, and I just wondered whether our reaction in the UK had the tragedy occurred here, heaven forfend, whether it would have been the same. There is a tradition in France of adult comic books, is there not? I mean, almost every bookstore you go into, they've got sheets of them. Now, there are people in this country interested in that too, but not nearly on the same scale. We don't have really an equivalent as such, do we? I mean, we have Private Eye, but that's, it's not based on artwork so much.
The comic books they call bande dessinée, and they're like graphic novels, and that's a huge tradition in France, always has been. But that's quite different from the Charlie Hebdo thing, because Charlie Hebdo is ostensibly a satirical magazine, but I mean, the attack was appalling. I mean, I was in Spain when it happened, and I spent the entire day glued to 24-hour television watching it and wishing I'd been back in France, because I'd have been out in the street as well, because it was an attack on freedom and the freedom of the press. But there's a flip side to that as well, and you have to. I mean, I looked at the Charlie Hebdo several times over the years, and never been particularly impressed by it. I think the key to good satire is to be funny, and it seems to me that they frequently weren't funny; they were just abusive, and I think satire requires intelligence and humour, and sometimes there's a shortfall in that in Charlie Hebdo. I think with freedom comes responsibility. I mean, it's one thing for me. I mean, I could just sit here and be abusive to you. I mean, I may well feel inclined to do that, but I would have, for it to be funny, I would have to be funny. And sometimes it seems to me there was a shortfall.
That's what's kind of mystified, I think, a lot of the immigrant population in France, isn't it? I mean, who've looked at it and thought, oh, wait a minute, all I get from this is a kind of, anti-Islamic tone. So why are you all celebrating?
Well, it's not just anti-Islamic, to be honest. I mean, it's anti-everything. It's anti all the religions, and they're brutal about the politicians. I mean, in a way and abusive, in a way that you would never see in this country. But it's a French tradition, and those cartoonists and that magazine is discussed in schools. School kids sit around and debate these cartoons and write dissertations about them. The cartoonists were personalities in TV shows, so they were hugely well known, and so when these guys went in and shot and gunned them all down, I mean, what a shock that was. I mean, it was like, because everybody felt they knew them, and it felt like an attack on France and French values and French freedom. Yeah.
And for you personally, I mean, what next? You're in Scotland at the moment. You're promoting the latest book. Which one is this again?
Runaway.
Runaway.
Called, yes.
Well, this is not based on your own experience.
It is.
That's what you were saying earlier.
Yeah.
So you ran off to London as a young man.
Yes.
And you've woven a story around that. There wasn't an actual body when you did run away to London?
No, there were just four very dirty bodies. Because it was myself and 3 friends who played in a band that ran away, you know, and we were 17, and 17-year-olds don't really know how to pack for running away, you know, so we didn't think to put in clean socks and clean underwear and things. So we were in a bit of a state by the time we came home with our tail between our legs.
But you just do that, do you? You can take something that happened in your life and think, well, actually, I can develop that into a story.
That's right, yeah. What I wanted to do is the 2 timeline thing again. I wanted the characters who ran away as kids to run away again 50 years later when they're old guys approaching their 70s, and obviously I had to find a trigger and a reason for them to do that. But you know, so it was looking at youth, it was looking at old age, it was a kind of snapshot on Britain then and Britain now. Has it changed? Hasn't it changed? What's different? So it was that all came to me last summer in 2013. When I had an unscheduled stop in Glasgow, and I went for a little wander around my old haunts and ended up in Central Station, looking down platform 1, which was where we'd come off the train on the way back, and our fathers were waiting for us, you know. And I just thought, oh.
Very good. So you're now on a tour in Scotland?
Yes, touring all around Scotland, and then I've got a final event down in London, Waterston's Piccadilly.
Not just, there's kind of a rock star of writing these days, aren't you?
Well, it's funny because, you know, the thing that really, my breakthrough books were the Lewis trilogy, which are extremely popular in the islands. And I went up a couple of years ago with somebody from the publisher, and I was getting stopped everywhere in restaurants. People were giving me napkins to sign, you know, and in hotel lobbies and stuff. And the guy from London's going, he's like being on tour with a rock star. Crazy stuff.
Well, long may it continue. Peter May, thanks very much.
Cheers.